All right, everybody, it seems like it is time again this week. It's Thursday, or really, it's Wednesday night right now. But it seems like it's time to talk about this week's chapter spoilers for My Hero Academia. This week's chapter is chapter 337. And again, we're continuing to talk about this whole situation going on with My Hero Academia's UA Traitor being Aoyama. Of course, I mean, if you don't know that by now, you've dodged that spoiler somehow. I mean, you clicked on this manga video and, it's time. So we're going to discuss what goes on in this chapter. I want to get all this ready in front of me. So thank you to Atsushi. Thank you to Dialb. Thank you to Rukasu, everyone who makes this possible, and let's get right to it. So the chapter begins on the villain side, with Dabi saying that if the other students find out about the traitor, it'll be bad for them. Because obviously, if you have a spy or anything and they get caught, that's definitely no good, but I don't think All For One is worried about that at all here, because he says no and compares it to a $5 lighter. Compares it to one of these. This isn't even $5, this is cheaper, so probably like less than that, but compares it to a $5 lighter. And says that, who gets mad if you lose one of those? And I actually get a little angry, but, okay. I don't like, no one likes losing lighters. So again, All For One compares Aoyama and his family to a $5 lighter, asking if anyone gets sad when those stop working. And if Aoyama and his parents succeed, that's great. If not, then it's kind of on to the next plan, and no one's really bothered about whether or not they survive or whether or not they ended up succeeding, because All For One's plans don't all seem to hinge on the traitor, right? It seems like there's a whole bunch of other routes to victory, and he's just kind of trying to make use of all the things that he can make use of, but if one thing doesn't work, so what? Whatever, let's move on to the next thing. And All For One tells Dabi that they're pretty much nothing more than disposable tools. Back to the forest in UA, and we see the parents start to carry Aoyama away, wanting to take him away from that area. Meanwhile, he cries and remembers the past, where he was a baby raised with all the joy and care in the world. Aoyama imagines that his parents must have been sadder than he himself for not having a quirk, so they listen to the rumors. And at this time, we see a black panel showing two people talking, and one of them says, "It seems like there's a guy who's able to give quirks to other people." Now, I want to stop right there for a quick second, because I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of parallels between Deku and Aoyama, right? But like one person who definitely can feel sort of like how these people felt, even though I'm going to hate on Aoyama's parents a little bit here, is Inko, of course, right? Inko Midoriya, we know she had a quirkless child. She took him to the doctor. The doctor told him, you're quirkless, buddy. And she had to deal with telling Deku that, he couldn't be a hero. He couldn't live up to his dreams, and he couldn't do that. And we know that Inko felt a lot of guilt because of that. We know that Inko actually went through a whole lot of guilt and a whole lot of pain as a result of not being able to help Deku in any way, and not being able to tell him that day that he could be a hero, the way that All Might does, right? And the way that Deku is doing to Aoyama here in a really beautiful way, and hopefully the way that he's going to do to Tenko, right? Like, even though the thought of Tenko being a hero is ridiculous, that at least that is what Tenko has wanted his entire life. So that line that All Might said to Deku, and now that Deku is saying to Aoyama, I feel like Aoyama is kind of like preparing us for saving Tenko, right? Even if it's momentarily, because he's a villain who is being saved, right? Who has parallels of Deku. That kind of gets us ready for the next villain to be saved with parallels to Deku, but I'm going to leave that alone for a second. So I definitely wonder if Inko ever had to worry about like hearing some rumors like that, or if she ever was approached by someone being like, hey, if your son is quirkless, I know where you could get one, you know what I mean? Or and that also makes me wonder if Aoyama's doctor was the same doctor as Deku's doctor, right? Like, if they're, Deku was diagnosed quirkless there, you assume if Aoyama had to be diagnosed quirkless at some point, right? Like, his family would bring him to a clinic that kind of specialized in that. Maybe that's what that doctor's clinic was, and then maybe around that doctor's clinic purposefully, because he works for All For One, right? He has people spreading those rumors of like, hey, your kid doesn't have to be quirkless, like, he's quirkless, but I could pull some strings, you know what I mean? And that is kind of like how kids get worked into like the Nomu program, because we know that the doctor took his own grandchild for the Nomu program, and how, quirks end up in All For One's hands, I guess, or, favors, I guess, end up being owed. So the quirk that Aoyama received was not compatible with his body, and it was trash, but his parents did their best to provide equipment that would help him use it. He was excited to start pursuing his dream, but that's when All For One started giving orders. Now, All For One's first order was All Might is going to become a teacher. Join UA. So that's really interesting. That tells us that he decided that Aoyama was going to join UA. So by the time that we see Aoyama in the very beginning, right, when he sees Deku, when they're in the exam to get into UA, fighting all the robots and stuff, at that point already he is the traitor. He is already the traitor at that point when he first meets Deku. And that's why I think it's important for us to have seen him so early, right? Like Aoyama is one of the first characters in the class that I think we meet, period. We see him very early on, and it's going to make it really interesting, of course, to go back and reread or rewatch My Hero Academia, because you're going to be able to go, look at him right there from the very beginning. Traitor was traitoring, right? Like, I think that's really awesome. The second order that All For One had for Aoyama was, let me know when the class will be isolated from the rest of the school. And that was, of course, when the USJ incident occurred. And that's when we had Shigaraki pretty much attacking the class, you know, and all that stuff that happened in the USJ arc. We still haven't got an entire, like, clarification on where Aoyama was during USJ. I mean, like, maybe he was just ported to, like, a safe location or something during that, but I wonder if we are going to get any sort of flashback to, like, him in the act of the villain activities and him actually, like, in the act of doing all that stuff, because I feel like it'd just be interesting to see and not just hear about it, you know? The third order that All For One had for Aoyama is, tell me the location of the training camp. And correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it supposed to be very difficult to ascertain the location of the training exams or whatever, the forest training for any of the students, right? Wasn't it supposed to be like secret until they got there? Like they were all like, none of the students are supposed to know or anything like that. Was there any easy way for him to get that information? I don't remember. I don't remember if there's any easy way for Aoyama to learn about where the training camp was going to be, but maybe that's something that will become a little more clear on like a reread or just something that hasn't really been explained yet. And the final order that All For One gave Aoyama, which is probably the most recent one that he was being told by his parents, is that now that Izuku Midoriya has returned to UA, make him act on his own again. So we know that All For One was talking about the whole time he was in prison, the only person he was focusing on was Izuku Midoriya, right? It was Deku. And now we see that, like all the other orders in the past, it was like, All Might is going to become a teacher at UA. Go there. Obviously focused on, you know, figuring out stuff about One For All, right? And stuff like that. Let me know when the class will be isolated from the rest of the school. All right, sure, continuing that kind of trend. But none of the previous orders, as you can tell, are specifically about Deku, right? Like the only order that is specifically about somebody before that is about All Might, right? But here we have All For One being very like, all right, yeah, Deku, I'm going to focus all my attention on you. Hey, Aoyama, get him to leave again. You know what I mean? If there's any way that you can get Deku to leave and get him by himself, please do that. We'll handle the rest, right? But get him out of there real quick. And I also think it's interesting to think about like how Aoyama would have went about doing that, right? Like how do you get Deku to leave again or anything like that, especially after, you know, all the work that it took to get him back, or, you know, maybe I don't know. I don't know how Aoyama would have went about doing that, how to get like Deku to leave again. I feel like that would have been that was kind of a trick order from All For One, right? Because like how do you do that? So then Aoyama then says that after reading Deku's letter and discovering that Deku was also quirkless, he fell into despair. And I wonder if that lines up with like the exact time or like Deku leaving UA. I wonder if that lines up with Aoyama not looking at us anymore, the audience, right? Like not looking at us in color spreads, not looking at us in the page, not looking at us anywhere, having his face hidden. I wonder like if he only started doing it after chapter 306 or whenever it was. I think I'm gonna go back and look and see like when exactly that began, and see if it lines up with that, because that would be great, because I do have a tweet saying that like Aoyama not looking at us anymore, like he has been throughout the whole series, is because now he's guilty about what he's done. And I feel like that would be like icing on the cake, honestly, by Horikoshi, because like that's such a meta thing that he looks at the audience, right? Like, and taking that and then using it like to express his actual genuine guilt. I feel like that would be awesome. So hopefully I'm not entirely reaching on there. I'm gonna check and make sure that I'm not reaching. So Aoyama starts freaking out and shoots a laser at Deku, and he's all emotional and screaming. But Hagakure actually steps in and goes like, and completely deflects the laser away from Deku, which is really cool, obviously, because we know that Hagakure and Aoyama have spent a lot of time training together. She knows how to reflect his light. I mean, that's been set up for a while. And I obviously appreciate Hagakure having a little bit of more purpose than just being the one to find Aoyama, right, and find out that he was a traitor. I like that she actually got to do something, right, because, you know, dodging a light-based attack is probably kind of difficult, and, you know, she kind of kept Deku from needing to do that at all and just kind of took care of that. Now, in response to Aoyama, Hagakure pretty much asked him how would he feel if everyone had died during the times where he betrayed them, right? And how did he feel when he was sitting in the classrooms or like in the dorms or during the culture festival or like during any of the times where they were all together? Like, how did he feel? How did he sit there and just lie? You know what I mean? Like, how did he sit there among all of them and just lie and sit there with a straight face and smile and twinkle and everything and not crack? You know, like, how must that have felt, pretty much? And I guess one of the bigger things that we actually see in this chapter, long awaited, a lot of people are gonna be really happy about it. I know some people are probably gonna be using it in their thumbnails. I'm not gonna use it in mine. We have the reveal of Hagakure's face, right? Like, we actually see, I think, like, a good chunk of it, like more than half of her face, I think. And once you have more than half, you can pretty much make up the rest, right? You just kind of figure it out there. But we have like a good majority of Hagakure's face. We see what she looks like. She doesn't look how I expected, actually, but I think she has, you know, just a standard Horikoshi, you know, design. You know, no complaints, nothing crazy. I don't know, like, if she has a hero costume, right? Like, I guess that would be cool to see. Like, if all this time she's just had like a really cool costume and we haven't gotten to see it or anything, I think that'd be interesting to see. But, you know, just cool, you know, cool to finally have like that mystery solved of, like, you know, what Toru looks like, because, you know, she's been in the series since the beginning. She's been in Class 1A since the very beginning of the series. And, you know, it was kind of getting down to the line here in the series where I was wondering if we were ever going to figure out what she was going to look like, or if that was just going to be one of those mysteries that, like, one day Horikoshi would draw and be like, hey, by the way, this is what Toru looked like for all those who care about my last work. So we see Toru pretty much crying about what's going on with Aoyama, and I think we see her face. I'm not sure if, like, it's actually her revealing her face to everyone, like, or like, because I've seen the panel, but I'm not sure, like, if it's artistic, right, where, like, we're seeing it because Horikoshi is showing it to us, the audience, or if, like, we're seeing it because Toru is revealing it to, like, Deku and them, right? And if that's happening on purpose or if that's happening by accident, because I didn't know she could reveal herself or anything like that. So from there, the parents go and try to explain their side of the story to Deku, but Deku restrains the three of them using Black Whip in a really cool panel. He, like, gets on top of Aoyama with, like, a handstand, and then he, like, the Black Whip splits off and grabs both of the parents, showing just how proficient Deku is obviously gotten with Black Whip. And obviously, you know, that's only going to get better because he's still doing training with everyone else, even though I'm sure this is going to be a little bit of an intermission in the training. Deku says that Hagakure acted so that Aoyama wouldn't hurt anyone else, so he asks Aoyama to just put a stop to this once and for all while they cry, and then, you know, he pretty much takes him in, right? And I don't think Aoyama and the family really put up much of a fight. Not that they really could. Once Deku kind of has them in Black Whip, I don't think they're going to be breaking out of that at all. So from there, we cut into a classroom where Aoyama and his parents are tied to chairs in front of All Might, Tsukauchi, Nezu, and other teachers. They analyze the situation, estimating when the quirk must have been given to Aoyama, and assuming that it does not have an explosion mechanism like Nagun, because probably by this point he would have exploded already, considering that he was found, and, you know, that means he's probably going to end up disobeying All For One's order, you'd assume. Whereas the second that Nagun even seemed like she had, like, any sort of change or horror or anything like that, boom, she exploded. I really appreciate here that pretty much everyone that was working on the Traitor plotline, like, really in deep cover, like Tsukauchi's here, Nezu's here, All Might's here. I appreciate that, like, they're all here, because obviously we want to, like, have everyone that's been working on this plotline be here when it's actually resolved, if not just for the fact that, you know, having that resolution for the characters, right? Like, I'm sure Tsukauchi and Nezu really wanted to know, and I like the fact that All Might obviously is heartbroken at this revelation, because he was thinking that, oh, it can't be any of my students, you know, they all have the heart of a hero. And I mean, come to find out that, I mean, Aoyama does have the heart of a hero, but his situation is really tough. And I guess All Might kind of has to see, like, the extra layer of why this is sad, because he sees that it's pretty much the opposite of the situation with Midoriya, right? Like, I feel like he has to see that. All Might's a pretty smart guy, and that just makes it all the more sad. So Tsukauchi tells all the students that he would like for them to leave the room, and we see a panel showing all of them shocked, pretty much saying that they're not going anywhere. Now, I think that the reason that Tsukauchi and everyone wants them to leave is so that they can question the parent and get really, you know, like, aggressive kind of it, but not without, like, getting super aggressive, but get very, like, you know, where's All For One at, you know? But instead of the students remaining in the room, we get a little bit of conversation from Ojiro, who wonders what would have happened if Hagakure hadn't found out about Aoyama, right? Like, what would he have done? Pretty much, like, we discussed a little bit earlier in the video, and, like, what would have happened to them as a result of that. And on the side, obviously, you have Kirishima, who doesn't want to believe any of this, right? Like, he's like one of the bigger brothers to the class, right? And I feel like Kirishima feels like he's way closer to everyone than he actually is. But because of that, him asking Aoyama here if it's all true, and pretty much telling Aoyama to say it's all a lie, again, it reinforces and really shows just how close all these characters were. Even if, like, some people in real life, like on Twitter or another places, say that they don't really care about Aoyama and all this and stuff like that, I feel like the more important thing as far as, like, the narrative is that the characters are affected by, you know, being betrayed. So from there, Bakugo says that he didn't expect to meet another former quirkless guy who received a quirk from someone else. The world really is small. And I think it really is small, Bakugo, because you also met another one. And his name is Shigaraki. And I'm going to hold on to that theory because I really think that that's exactly what happened to Shigaraki. And that is going to be an ironic comment by Bakugo. But I guess we're going to have to wait and see. Tsukauchi asks them to reveal everything that they know about All For One. But the father says that they don't know anything. They just received the quirk and were following orders. All For One even showed them corpses so they'd understand what would happen if they failed or lied to him. And I feel like, again, yeah, like that's very All For One. He's not playing games, you know, hey, do what I say or you're gonna end up like them. And through that fear, he pretty much makes it so he doesn't have to tell you anything, right? He could just remind you like, hey, I don't have to tell you why I'm telling you to do this. I don't gotta tell you where I am. I gotta tell you who I am. I gotta tell you anything. Just do it or you're gonna end up like them over there. Aoyama then starts saying that because of the classmates he might have had to kill were so nice to him, he ended up acting that way too and got closer to everybody. After reading Deku's letter and finding out the truth about his quirk and his fight against All For One, he despaired at his own misery, and then he despaired again when he realized that the first thing he thought of was himself, not what it meant for Deku. So pretty much Aoyama, after he hears the whole story about, you know, Deku and All For One, he instantly thinks about himself and not about his friend, right? And he feels really bad for being selfish, and that kind of reinforces him saying here that he's a rotten villain with every fiber of his being, right? That his soul is rotten. That's how he feels. He feels really bad for himself, and we're getting a lot of like sad boy Aoyama speech. But that is how All For One will make you feel, right? All For One will make you feel like you were born twisted. And I use that quote specifically because that's what he did to Tenko. And I honestly don't feel like Tenko was born twisted, right? Just like Aoyama here. We know that Aoyama is not that bad of a person, right? Like he's just doing this because his parents are threatened. And I feel like Shigaraki is the same way. Whereas we see that when he's a little kid, he was compared to All Might by other kids who he played with. And that is very purposeful, right? That's saying you're comparing him to like the most golly G, you know, America's ass guy in the whole series. You know, who is obviously a good person. Anyone who's like All Might is generally. But then anytime you have All For One's influence on somebody, it's always going to twist what they have and twist what's going on into a bad light. And obviously that's what you have going on here with Aoyama. And it's really tragic because you can tell that Aoyama regrets every second of being in the situation, and he really wishes there was like an easy way out of it, but there's not. Deku shouts that if Aoyama was really a rotten villain, he wouldn't have tried to save Tokoyami and Bakugo at the training camp. He also wouldn't have written that message with the cheeses, which was really a SOS call to Deku that he didn't realize at the time. Now Deku goes on to say that Aoyama is not crying right now because he failed to obey All For One, but rather because he doesn't want to betray his friends. He says that he met a hero earlier who had her heart used by All For One, but she didn't give up on helping other heroes to reach her goal. Obviously, he's talking about Nagant. And then Deku closes it off by saying that no one should be called a villain for the rest of their lives over a single crime. And then he holds his hand out and asks Aoyama to take it, saying, "You can still become a hero." Now, obviously, that's instantly going to get a lot of people on the talk no jutsu train, right? Not a lot of ways this I feel like this plot line is going to end out. I really feel like next week is going to be the time to see whether or not like this kind of like happy resolution we have here with "you can be a hero too, Aoyama," is going to go anywhere, because I think next week we are going to see something, right? I'm not going to put all my chickens in one basket, but I do think we're going to see the kind of situation where like it seems like everything is settled. It seems like it all worked out with Aoyama. It seems like cool, that's all good. But like one of those other plans that All For One has is going to come snapping right in and kind of like, I think it's going to be a problem. I don't think that's going to go nowhere, honestly. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I'm going to save any other theorizing that I have for it for my actual chapter discussion, because this is not my chapter discussion. This is just the spoiler video. So happy to have you folks. Happy to discuss what's going on in this next chapter of My Hero Academia, chapter 337. And I appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys later today, or maybe later tomorrow, for an actual proper kind of discussion for what I think is going to be going on next chapter. Maybe like a proper discussion for this one once we have some proper translations. But for now, that's all I got. So I'll see you guys. It's really late at night. I'm going to get some rest after this. It's Pineapple. I love you very much. Aoyama is still the traitor. No fake outs this week. Peace.